Chapter 4. Scripture is the acts of God. Scripture is sound of the divine. If I know Scripture properly, I live. But if I do not, then I die. If I learn Scripture as knowledge and try to reveal myself, it is better that I did not learn it at all. Scripture is not about my knowledge and wisdom, but is the sound of God's divine. Sound of the divine refers to the sound of those who are stirred with God's divine. When the prophets of the Old Testament received the living word and met God, they fainted on that spot. This means that they went perfectly on their knees in front of God's majesty. They put themselves down in front of Him and in trembling bowed down. When the word falls and I become stirred, trembling comes. My sound cannot come out. When the word rests and He flows inside my body, human sounds cannot come out. It is because my sound is evil that brings me down. The sound of truth is sound that causes me to tremble in front of God. It is sound that brings me to life. So my movement changes into God's movement. When the prophets Ezekiel, Daniel, and Joel met God, it can be seen that they trembled. When God's living word rests, my thoughts and lust disappear. It must be this way to receive God's perfect things. The book that has been recorded in this way is Scripture. When the word genuinely comes out as the things of God, trembling comes. When God went in search of the prophets, because He rested in very strong trembling, they knew that it was God. The things of God are beautiful, clean, and not mixed with my lust. To bring lives of the spirits to life, not my things, but God's things, must be cried out just as is. If I try to deliver according to the knowledge and wisdom that I accumulated, the things of human get mixed when conveyed. If things mixed with human knowledge get conveyed, they cannot raise up the life inside man's spirit. Scripture is God's acts. Inside the 66 books of Scripture, there are traces of works that God did from one era to another. Scripture is God's head to toe. It cannot be that I only know certain parts. No matter what part of the Word we see, whether the Old Testament or New Testament, we must meet God at that place. Scripture is the footprint of the ancestors of faith. It is God's acts. Then, the acts of God revealed in Scripture must also be revealed from within myself and from inside my daily living. If God reigns over me, Jesus is with me. And if I follow the stir of the Spirit, such life itself is recorded as God. Scripture is not a history book, but God's acts. Now, God's works toward this era must become revealed through me. God, who had gone inside human beings and moved, now goes perfectly inside me. My footprint is Scripture. Scripture is a mirror where I can see myself. I am to see Scripture and see myself. A mirror's mission is to reflect. It allows us to fix the bad things and reveal the good things. God beautifully fulfills all the work that He promised. God's time arrives, and He opens the era of love, which He had planned since the beginning. Now, as the apple of God's eye, He meticulously inspects all details of myself, as if looking at a mirror. God is looking at all of my footprints. Then, each and every one of our movements must become God's will. My footprints, made by my walk with God, become Scripture. Each and every one of my movements revealed from me is Scripture. When Moses was born, God fulfilled Scripture through the midwives who saved him. Moses thrown into the bank of the Nile, Pharaoh's princess taking him in, and all the happenings in the castle were footprints of God's Scripture. Such fulfillment of Scripture has now been carried over to me. How great of a blessing it is to be used for God. That we stand in the place where God's Scripture is being fulfilled is a miracle. Now, the time comes when all the acts of the era of love become revealed. It is not that I write in my diary every day, but God looks at me and writes my diary. This is Scripture.